Employers lose $530 billion due to poor employee health. That is why I created WorkFit, your AI assistant, to remind employees to take micro breaks with simple exercises and mindfulness activities to boost energy, improve posture, and reduce stress. Healthy employees, thriving business. Get WorkFit now.
You're looking to make your app the best it can be. It sounds simple, but the reality is anything but. There's setting up your infrastructure, building features, fixing bugs. The list goes on. Firebase is here to help. We offer a platform for you to build and grow apps and games users love, with tools to support throughout your app and business's journey. Get to market faster with a secure, fully managed backend and streamlined development process that lets you focus on what matters most. Make confident decisions to deliver the best experience. With tools to test that your app works as designed, pinpoint issues, and gain user insights. And find the flexibility, stability, and automation you need as you grow. All in one platform trusted by millions of developers at companies of all sizes. Make your app the best it can be with Firebase.
So you think you might be a great project manager, but you need to enhance your skills? Then get this course on Udemy. You'll learn the tools and techniques of great project managers, and you'll be ready for certification that's truly career-changing. Get the skills, get the confidence, get this course.
For every web developer who has a job, there are at least 10 who are stuck in the endless loop of learning HTML, CSS, and JavaScript again and again. That's because people underestimate what it takes to become an employable web developer. On this path, there are so many different technologies to learn that many people give up midway. This video will make sure that you are not one of them. I'll also cover 3 mistakes that you need to avoid at any cost. Let's get started. Web development contains 2 parts, front-end development and back-end development. Front-end developers program the feel and behavior of a website. This is what a user actually experiences when they visit a website. Back-end developers make this behavior possible. They do some things behind the scene that users don't get to see. Think of it this way. When you go to a restaurant, you just experience the dining area, the tables, chairs, menu, and the overall ambiance. That's your front end. Now back-end would be the kitchen of the restaurant. It's where all the behind-the-scenes action happens. Ingredient preparation, cooking, and order fulfillment. All of that happens in the kitchen. In a restaurant, we also have a server. What would be the equivalent of a server in the web development world? If you're thinking that the answer is a web server, that is not correct. I'll answer this when I cover backend development in detail. But if you think you know the answer, leave a comment. Anyway, let's start with front-end development. HTML, CSS, and JavaScript are the building blocks of front-end development. To understand what each one of them exactly does, let's imagine that you are building a house. HTML would be the blueprint of this house. What are the different rooms in the house? How many bathrooms will be there? All of that is HTML. For example, on YouTube, HTML is what decides that there will be a like and subscribe button here. CSS is like an interior designer that decides what your rooms look like. For YouTube, it decides the shape, color, and size of the subscribe and like button. When you hit the subscribe button, the color of the button changes. That's also CSS doing its magic. JavaScript is like an electrician that installs smart home features in your house. In the YouTube example, when you hit the subscribe button, JavaScript sends a request to YouTube servers to update the subscriptions of my channel. YouTube servers will store this information and use it to recommend my next videos to you. Now that you understand the basics, let's see how we can learn HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. And this is where most people make their first big mistake. They spend months, sometimes even years learning HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. Don't get me wrong, I'm not saying that basics are not important, but the basics are just the starting point. There are a whole lot of other technologies that you need to learn in order to become an employable web developer. So I would not spend too much time here. I'll just learn the top 20% concepts that cover the 80% of use cases. I'll learn the remaining concepts in the next steps. To learn and can test my knowledge at the same time, I'll go to W3 Schools. For HTML, I'll start from the top and do everything until HTML graphics. For CSS, I'll do everything until CSS grid. For JavaScript, I'll cover everything until JS HTML DOM. I will add all the links to the resources in the description. Congratulations, you have covered 15% of what needs to be done to become a web developer. Let's keep going. When you start working with CSS, you'll see that same things repeat again and again. You'll set height, add padding, and fix alignment of different objects and so on. And when you do this for so many objects in your web app, your CSS files start becoming very big and hard to manage. On top of that, debugging becomes a huge pain because there is so much repeated code. To solve all these problems, you would want to learn a CSS framework. Now there are so many different frameworks that you can choose from. Different people prefer different frameworks for different reasons. My reason is very straightforward. I would choose a framework that is easiest to learn. Once I know the basics of CSS, I want to be productive as fast as possible. If you're someone like me, you would go for Tailwind CSS. Tailwind is a utility first framework. In other words, Tailwind already has all the repeated code pre-written. You just need to go to your HTML elements and use it. This makes Tailwind very easy to pick for beginners. To learn Tailwind quickly, you can go to the Tailwind playground and play around with the code. You can read their beautifully written documentation and test what you are learning in the playground. If you already know HTML and CSS, this should be fairly straightforward. If you need more help, you can also check out the official YouTube channel of Tailwind Labs. We have covered another 5% with Tailwind. Let's move on to the JavaScript framework now. Just like CSS frameworks, we also have JavaScript frameworks to make our life easy. There are again many popular options here, but we will only talk about the most popular option, which is React. Technically, React is not a framework. It's a library, but that's not important for now. React makes building user interfaces more manageable by breaking them into small reusable components. React has a virtual DOM that allows it to update only part of the web page, rather than re-rendering the entire thing. If you don't know what that means, don't worry about it. You will learn as you go. But why did I pick React over all these other options? My reason remains the same. I want you to get to a stage where you are building your own projects really fast, and React is among the easiest to learn and most in demand at the same time. So how do we learn React effectively? The official React documentation has made it very easy for us. They have a quick start guide which according to them covers 80% of the React concepts. This guide also contains a walkthrough of how to build tic-tac-toe in React, and they also teach you how to think in React. There is a Learn React section that I highly recommend you go through. But if you are short on time, you can move on to the next step. With React Basics, you have covered another 10%. So far, you have just learned the basics of a few technologies. But learning technologies and actually applying them to solve new problems are two different things. And that's the gap we are going to bridge now. With everything that you have learned so far, if I give you a new web app to build, most people are going to struggle with it. And that's totally fine. Struggle is where you actually learn. So if you're someone who enjoys the struggle, more power to you. Please go ahead and start building because that's how you learn the most. But for others who need a little bit of hand-holding in the beginning, I have a recommendation for you. You can start following along with someone who's building a real-world application. On YouTube, you'll find many people building clones of popular applications like Amazon or Netflix. My personal favorite is this channel by Sony Sanga. His videos will introduce you to popular patterns in React. He also covers some new technologies like Next.js. Next.js is a React framework that enables extra features like server-side rendering. If you know React, Next.js is very easy to pick. If you do all this, you will cover another 10% of your web development journey. Like I mentioned earlier, true learning will only happen if you start building new things by yourself. Building your own projects would be the next 20% of your journey. But what should you actually build? I recommend that you build a basic version of Instagram app. Don't worry about videos or reels for now. Just build a version where people can share their photos and see a newsfeed containing pictures of their friends. You can also add functionality to like photos and add comments. Showing pictures from friends might not be possible right now because we have not covered backend yet. You can use some hard-coded URLs for now. After learning the backend, we'll come back to this project and build the backend as well. Congratulations, you have successfully completed the front-end part of the web development. It's time to move on to the backend. This is where people make their second biggest mistake, which is that they fall victim to the buzz around full stack development. For those who don't know, full stack developers work both on front end as well as the back end. Now I'm not saying that you should not become a full stack developer. Full stack is a great end goal. The point I'm trying to make is that you don't have to be a full stack developer to find your first job. Front end development is enough. There are many jobs for front end developers. So I recommend that you don't rush into the back end development. Test yourself early in the job market to see where you stand. And you can continue learning back end on the side. For the back end, we'll again pick something that is easy to learn. We already know JavaScript, so the easiest thing to do would be to use JavaScript in the backend as well. JavaScript was designed to be a scripting language for web browsers. To be able to run JavaScript on the server or backend, we need to use Node.js. Node.js is a JavaScript runtime for servers. If you don't understand what I'm saying, that's completely fine. You will learn all this when you start working with Node. Now, similar to frontend, we need a JavaScript framework for the backend as well. Express provides you all the tools you need to build APIs. Remember in the beginning of the video, we talked about how dining area is the front end and the kitchen is the back end of a restaurant. An API would be the equivalent of the server of the restaurant. Basically, you place all your orders or requests with the API, and the API responds to you with the information you need. An API does this with the help of the data stored in a database. So in addition to Express, you'll need to use a library like Mongoose to talk to the database. Mongoose is a Node.js library for MongoDB, which is a popular database. I know all this sounds confusing, but it's not that hard when you start using it. To get acquainted with Express, you can quickly go through their documentation. But to actually learn Express and Mongoose, you can follow along with this video by Traversy Media and create a web app from scratch. I recommend directly by building because if you have come so far, you already know enough programming to pick Express easily with this project. And if you finish this step, you would have already covered another 20% of the journey. Now you are on the last leg. You need one final push, and that would come by building the backend of the Instagram project that you started. Add the capability to upload photos and follow each other by storing all the required information in a database. Create a newsfeed that contains actual photos of your friend and not the dummy data. Once you do that, you will finish the last mile of the journey. And this brings me to the final big mistake many people make. They don't trust the process. They start this long journey of learning web development. They copy a few projects on the way and add them to their resume. Eventually they are not able to find the job and they give up. Every step of the journey is important. So don't skip any step and trust the process. It might take you slightly longer, but you'll eventually get there. Now I did not get a chance to cover how to prepare for coding interviews in this video. If you are interested, you can watch this video. My name is Sahil and I'll see you in the next one.
So you want to be a software engineer at Google? Go to algoexpert.io. Pick a question, read the prompt, write some code, run your code, write some more code, run your code again. Get stuck? Check some hints. Still stuck? Watch our comprehensive explanation videos that cover the underlying algorithm at hand and that give you a line-by-line coding walkthrough of the solutions. Algo Expert is the all-in-one platform for you to prepare for your coding interviews, ace them, and land your dream job. So, what are you waiting for? Do you want to be an Algo Expert?
আমি যেখানেই যাই ময়লা এবং দূষণ আমার ত্বককে নিস্তেজ করে দেয়। গার্নিয়ার মেন টার্বো ব্রাইট ডাবল অ্যাকশন ফেস ওয়াশ 2x ব্রাইটনিং পাওয়ার চারকোল ও ভিটামিন সি যুক্ত। এটা ময়লা এবং দূষণ গভীরভাবে পরিষ্কার করে, নিস্তেজতার সাথে লড়াই করে আর দেয় ইনস্ট্যান্ট ব্রাইট স্কিন। গার্নিয়ার মেন টার্বো ব্রাইট ডাবল অ্যাকশন ফেস ওয়াশ ট্রাই করুন গার্নিয়ারের বানানো ভারতের 1 নম্বর মেন্স ফেস ওয়াশ বাই গার্নিয়ার মেন।
This is super uncomfortable for me. I've intentionally not talked about how much I make as a self-taught software engineer, and I believe this is probably the first time that I'm even going to say where I work. The reason 98% of new software developers are not getting job offers is because they are not doing these 11 things. How is it possible for an average construction worker to learn to code, to get that super hard first programming job, and then get hired by a large tech company making hundreds of thousands of dollars in total compensation each year? 9 years ago, I was totally that construction worker because I couldn't get another job with my near worthless history degree. So I ended up freezing my butt off in the cold each winter, doing physical labor for mediocre pay and no benefits. I'm now a full-time senior front-end software engineer at Adobe, and I'm self-taught, working in a nice cozy office. So let's talk about why most self-taught devs fail. Why you should choose to become a front-end developer instead of learning Java, PHP, Python, or some other back-end focused programming language. The technologies you should learn, the right way to learn to code, and how to get your first job as a programmer. What's the matter with your mind and your sign But first, what's your background story? I would totally dig it if you'd let me know in the comments. Fist bump. All right, there are 4 main reasons most people fail when they want to become a self-taught programmer. First, they underestimate how hard it's going to be. There are plenty of videos out there about people who are learning to code in 3 months, 6 months, and in my case it took around 9 months, though 3 to 6 months is probably not very common unless you end up in a full-time boot camp that can really help you stay focused. I did it in 9 months in the evenings with the support and patience of my wife and kids, because I end up having to sacrifice pretty much every evening during that time. And that's not going to be something that's going to be doable for a lot of people. It took a ton of self-discipline on my part, especially on the days where I just wanted to give up, because there will be those days. You also have to be realistic about your ability to learn quickly. Some people learn incredibly fast and things just stick. Others need more time to process it. If you compare your progress to a fast learner, you're going to get discouraged and may quit even if you're actually learning code at a normal pace. Second, for most people, getting your first programming job is going to suck. I'll share some good strategies to overcome this in a minute, but a lot of people wash out before getting that first job. Third, some people's brains just aren't wired for this kind of work. I know plenty of people who are amazing working with their hands, and that's totally fine. There's nothing wrong with that. If you think that's you, before you give up, I encourage you to question yourself. Is it really because you don't have the brain for it? Or is it just because it's hard and you lack grit? Fourth, a lot of people make poor decisions when it comes to picking a programming language or area of software development. So let's talk about why I chose to become a front-end web developer. And in simple terms, front-end web development is just the visual part of a web page or application that you interact with. There are a couple of really important reasons why I chose this. First, I have nothing against back-end development. It's super important. This is where the magic happens for storing and retrieving data. But let's face it, back-end code is visually boring. And this means when you go into an interview, the only thing they have to test you on are code problems and your ability to communicate what you know verbally. You're new, so you might understand what you're doing, but it's super easy to get stuck trying to explain things and just not using the right words to describe it and to get hung up. At least that's how it was for me when I first started. Perhaps that's hard for you too right now. But the cool thing about front-end development is that you can show the finished project. Even if you stumble on describing some of the things, they can see what you have done. If you have other valuable skills like an eye for aesthetics or good user experience intuition, it will show through in your work. Second, the front end includes everything from software engineering skills to design skills, and so it tends to be more open to self-taught developers as a community. It's a pretty big mix of different backgrounds, whereas with back-end development, you can tend to have a higher concentration of computer science grads. Now, it's still going to take a lot of hard work, but it's going to be easier to stand out and outskill other self-taught front-end web developers who maybe just don't have the same level of ambition as you do. Third, on the front end, there are plenty of tools to make it super easy to set up boilerplate code needed for an application, and that lets you quickly jump into developing everyday code skills without getting lost doing all of the complex configuration stuff. You can learn all of that later. For a lot of people, being able to see visual changes happening on the page can be super exciting. It's awesome to get fast feedback on the progress you're making, and this really helped me stay motivated. With backend, there are also tools to set things up, but the basic stuff can be pretty boring, and it's just so much harder to impress people with what you have done. It's like walking in the shadows of your girlfriend's real boyfriend. And this is really important when talking to non-technical hiring managers or recruiters, because even these people can appreciate a website or an app that looks nice, even if they don't know what's going on underneath the hood. Especially websites where you can hit that like button. I would totally appreciate that. So, but you are going to end up having to learn 3 things: HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. HTML is kind of like code Legos that gives your app structure. The CSS, or cascading style sheets, lets you define the size, the shape, color, the animations for each of those Legos. And JavaScript is how we give it instructions. If someone clicks on a button, what should happen? Maybe it loads some data onto the page. If you hear someone say vanilla JavaScript, they're talking about writing code with plain JavaScript without using any third-party libraries or frameworks. And as software engineers, we do a lot of repetitive stuff. And instead of writing everything from scratch ourselves, smart devs will usually use libraries of heavily tested code written by other people. You should probably ignore anyone who says you should only use vanilla JavaScript, or else you'll end up basically building your own crappy library that nobody else knows how to use. And if you care about actually getting a job, most companies will want you to have experience working with one of the major JavaScript frameworks like React Or you could learn Angular if you want to become a boomer living in your mother-in-law's basement. The right way to learn to code is not reading a book cover to cover. It's not trying to understand everything. There's just way too much stuff in HTML, CSS, and JavaScript that you just won't use. It's far better to master the core concepts and to learn all that other stuff as you need it at some other time instead of just becoming mediocre in everything. The best way to figure this out is
You never listen.
You never listen.
When you find your zone and you let things flow, you'll get it done. You'll break the mold and you keep it bold. Just show them how it's done. Show them how it's done. Show them how it's done.
এই ডিপিও অনলাইন এমবিএ করে কি করবে?
পরিচয় পরিচয় বানাতে হবে। ভাগ্যের ডার্কনেসে হার্ড ওয়ার্কের ফ্লাড লাইট লাগাতে হবে।
to just step away from following tutorials as soon as you're comfortable with the basics and just start building things that solve problems that you are already interested in. As you write code, you'll start to identify things that you just keep doing over and over again, and you should focus on learning how to do those things really well. How can you make that code chunk smaller, more reusable, maybe more efficient, and easier to read? That kind of stuff. And then you should be able to explain why you chose to do it the way you did. In your interview, you'll probably get asked questions that stump you or that are just hard to remember the exact answer. If you understand generally what's going on, it's going to be super easy for you to say, I don't remember that one thing, and then just start to explain everything else. And that's probably one of the best tips for dealing with your first interview. In fact, that is exactly what happened during the interview that led to my first job offer. Being able to talk about a lot of core concepts can really make up for messing up on some random technical question, and trust me, I messed up on a few questions. And here are some more tips for how to get your first job as a programmer. First, most people who are fast at getting their first dev job either know someone at the company or they have someone mentoring them who can vouch for them and their skills, or else they just got lucky. And if you want to be that person, try to build solid relationships with people in the industry as soon as possible. Second, if you've made it this far, I assume you are liking this video, so consider subscribing. I have a ton of other videos to help you become a programmer. Okay, for reals. Second, you are at a distinct disadvantage when compared to computer science grads. They have a paper that vouches for their educational experience, and that is something you don't. You have to get practical experience any way possible, and that means build your own projects, work for free if you have to, but you have to find creative ways to get your own experience. In my case, I built personal projects in the evening, and then in my downtime at work, I started building things and doing things for my employer that could provide them value and build some skills, stuff that they didn't even ask for. And this means I had to be proactive and come up with ideas on my own. I created my own opportunities to get experience, and you're gonna have to do similar things too. Third, you wanna have a portfolio that can sell your potential, and instead of focusing all of your attention on a single large project, I would shoot for a handful of smaller projects first, and then do one that is more of a complex project. The people interviewing you are probably only gonna give it a quick glance, so seeing lots of projects is going to have a bigger visual impact initially. And by starting with building the smaller ones, you're going to get some quick wins that are going to help you stay motivated and then dive into that larger one. If you start with a really complex app, there's just a good chance that you are going to get lost and that you might give up. For these projects, you need to do stuff that interests you rather than just copying existing projects or tutorials. Simple and unique applications are going to be way better than a complex tutorial clone, but a unique complex project will really stand out. And don't get me wrong, I mean, following tutorials can really help you develop your skills, but just don't consider them to be good portfolio pieces. When you get to an interview, there's a good chance that they haven't even clicked the link to see your portfolio. So bring an iPad or a laptop and be prepared to show them what you built and explain the technologies you used and why you did what you did. If you used multiple frameworks, tell them what you liked about each one and what you didn't like. That will go a long ways. Fourth, and one of my personal favorites, is don't just sit there hoping they'll ask you the right questions. It's like politics. Instead of waiting timidly, just answer their question as best you can and then try to steer the conversation to related topics you are prepared to discuss with confidence. Fifth, the spray and pray approach to sending out resumes just doesn't work well. If that's what you're doing, don't complain about why you're not getting interviews. You need to do whatever you can to get in contact with the hiring manager directly instead of going through HR and the online application process. You don't want to be